Hello and welcome to the Post-Gazette Penguins podcast. I'm your host, King Jemison, joined by my colleague, Jason Mackey, and we're going to get to a lot today, but first want to say that this show is presented by FanDuel. Now, Jason, we're going to talk about the Penguins 2025. We're going to talk about the Penguins 2026. But before we do, how are you just feeling about turning the page on another year and moving into 2026?
Well, they looked like the worst hockey team ever to end December, and now they look like the best hockey team ever. Perfectly logical, right, King? That's the way this season's gone. 8-2-2 start when they're supposed to be a bottom 5 team in the NHL. We're talking about expectations and playoffs and proving everybody wrong. Then they go into the tank, and it's time to fire everybody. It's just kind of par for the course right now. It's like wild spikes of things, and I don't know. They're a fun team to follow. I don't know if you were asking about me personally. Me personally, I'm fine, but it's I was home last night. You were at PPG Paints Arena. I was in Chicago. I saw that thing. I don't know. There's some stuff going on, man. Some intriguing stuff. I think it has to do with getting a little R&R. Helps all of us. But they're playing some better hockey, that's for sure.
That's certainly what Brett Kulak told me after the game yesterday. He's like, it's just really nice to spend time with your family, and it re-energizes you and makes you excited to play again. And it is funny how those very simple things have very clear results, even in something that it can be as complex as hockey. But yes, I was asking about you personally, and I do hope for a great 2026 for the Mackey household.
Same for you, buddy. Same for you.
It does feel kind of
exciting times here on the Penguins beat.
It is. It absolutely is. And I'm sure we'll talk about that more as well. But 2026 kind of feels like a fake year. Like it doesn't seem like we should be that far along. And I know I'm young to be saying that, but yeah, it'll be an exciting new year. But we're going to talk about that. And first, I think we need to look back on what was a very eventful 2025. Our colleague at the Post-Gazette, Noah Hiles, wrote about the entire sports world of Pittsburgh in 2025. We're going to focus on just the Penguins side of that. And we're not going to talk too much about the team's current 2-game winning streak that Jason referenced. You can read all about that on Post-Gazette.com. Both of us have written about some of the things that have changed, some of the things that have looked good as they've come out of the holiday break. But suffice it to say, they're back to playing some of their best hockey of the season, a pair of 4-goal wins on Sunday over Chicago and Tuesday over Carolina. Justin Brazeau and Anthony Mantha are on fire. Artur Shilovs and Stuart Skinner have been excellent in net the last couple games. So a lot of things are going right. Hard to say how much is sustainable. We can talk about the nitty-gritty of the hockey anytime. Today, we're going to zoom out a little more. So there are some off-ice things that happened in 2025 that are clearly bigger than hockey, that absolutely bear mentioning, but we're not going to necessarily focus on them on this podcast. Like, of course, Mike Lang passed away in February. A terrible loss for the Penguins community, and just somebody who can absolutely never be equaled. I love hearing his calls, on the broadcast before the games, and on social media. I mean, what a special part of Penguins history, and we can't say enough about his impact. There was a fan who fell from the stands in October. Obviously, another thing that was much bigger than hockey that absolutely is one of the biggest stories of 2025, but not something we're going to dwell on this podcast. And on a happier note, Marc-Andre Fleury said goodbye, played in a preseason game, got his fond farewell in Pittsburgh. So there were a lot of things that really had nothing to do with this particular hockey team, but that were obviously very important stories this year. But we're going to talk more about what's changed with the team and what the team looks like going into 2026. So, Jason, on that note, what just stands out to you about the Penguins' very busy 2025?
Man, that's a lot. A lot stands out. They were sold. They've had some problems, but their aging stars aren't them. Sidney Crosby is elite, passing Mario Lemieux. It's not 87 and 71, other than 71's health. They have a new franchise goaltender. He's in waiting right now in Sergei Murashov because of the Tristan Jarry trade. But, as you've sort of recapped this, it's kind of put it all into perspective a little bit for me and how busy this year has been for this team and how much has changed. I start with ownership. It has to. Like, you're being sold. This is going to happen. Like, that is not insignificant. You have a new coach too. That's another thing as we focus on things. Kyle Dubas has a new direction that I think he's even more bought in on. I think he was before, but you can see where they're going. They've made a couple trades inside of that. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think if you say, are the Penguins, I don't want to say have the best direction because this was probably prior to the Pirates offseason, which I really liked, but like the best future direction of any team in the city, like they were right up there. They looked really good. And I still believe it. Like, I think Dubas is very smart and doing a lot of very solid things. So I guess I boil it down to this, Kane. There's so much has changed. We've learned so much about this team. A lot of it is positive. There's been these wild spikes. It's been very volatile in terms of results, which has been fun and crazy to cover. But I'm looking forward to maybe more of a stable 2026 where you've got some ownership. You know what you are. You know what you want to build toward. We learned a lot.
Yeah, and at the same time, I think there's multiple directions this team could go in 2026. It could move more towards that rebuild. It could move more towards pushing for one last playoff run with the big three. But I think on that note, Jason, you brought up just a lot of the change, specifically calling out the ownership. We don't know what the Hoffman family of companies' impact on the Penguins is going to be. We've both heard good things, but obviously they're entirely new to major professional sports ownership. I think it's too early to comment on what that means. It's obviously a huge deal that the team was sold and that Fenway Sports Group basically doubled their money in 4 years. But we can see the impact of that coaching change. Mike Sullivan out, Dan Muse in. Sullivan, obviously a Stanley Cup winning head coach, a huge part of this Penguins era. But what have you seen positively from Dan Muse now in his first few months of the 2025-2026 season?
Well, I mean, I think Dan Muse knows what he's doing. Dan Muse is not coaching this team to make haphazard decisions with the puck in the third period. You can argue that he's not getting through to the players or his message isn't sinking in. I sort of agree with that, but I think it's more because the players he's dealing with are almost like, defiant. It's not that, this isn't a Mike Johnston situation is the way that I've written it. And like, I covered that team and those players did not respect Mike Johnston because he was new to the NHL. He did not have, the personality of Mike Sullivan, very smart hockey guy. Dan Muse is not in Mike Johnston territory. Like, it's more Mike Sullivan territory. The guy clearly knows the game. The guy works his butt off. Really, really nice guy, good person. We've both been around him a lot. I think he is very much capable of finding the solutions, and I think they may be on their way to finding those. And I think the problem is just their inconsistency. Like, they can do it. They've shown it. It's a matter of building those habits and understanding how to play with the lead. And you do kind of have a young, inexperienced team, although it's also old. Like, it's a weird mix of things. But anyway, impressions of Muse, just I think very highly of the guy, King. I don't know about you, but the ways and areas where the Penguins are short, Dan Muse is not one of them for me.
I absolutely agree. That October run when they were 8-2-2 and kind of took the NHL world by storm, that had a ton to do with the energy and the new ideas that he brought. It was like the classic new coach energy story that plays out across all sports. And that says nothing about who Mike Sullivan is as a coach, but it says that he'd been there for a long time and that a fresh voice in the room with new ideas made a huge difference for this team. And for the most part, they've continued a lot of what they were doing tactically, structurally from that first month. Just they haven't gotten the same level of goaltending. They've made a lot more dumb mistakes. They found some absolutely inexcusable ways to lose games, and they got bit hard by the injury bug. Obviously, there's things he could do better in that regard, but it's hard to say that any of those things are distinctly his fault.
People need to remember too, let me just jump in for a second.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of people thought that this team was going to be horrendous. They're not.
Bottom 5.
They are not horrendous. I mean, they are inconsistent and they are maddening, and they need to learn some things, and there are habits that need to change. But I give Dan Muse a lot of credit. Like, when he has his full lineup at his disposal, and I know we said we weren't going to talk about the current product. I think this is relative to the whole thing. Like, when you have Blake Lizotte in this lineup, when you get Evgeny Malkin back, when you get the second line performing the way it did last night, and the idea is getting that ancillary scoring. When you get that, this can be a very good team. They haven't had all of that. Guys have been hurt. Guys have gone quiet, whatever. That's the inconsistent we're talking about. But, in terms of what Dan Muse is doing and what he's instructing them to do, very good. I'll shut up now.
Yeah, no, I think that makes total sense. And another thing to note is that the team that Dan Muse is coaching, the one that has looked better than most people expected, that's racked up 43 points in the first 38 games and is two points out of a wild card spot with some games in the bag compared to some teams in front of them. This roster looks entirely different. It was completely remade in the offseason at the end of last season. I mean, I believe 4 of their top 10 scorers so far this year are basically new players, whether they were at the end of last season or in the offseason. Your entire second line of Justin Brazeau, Anthony Mantha, and Tommy Novak were either acquired towards the end of last year or in the offseason. Those guys are now leading your offense, at least for these last couple of games. Connor Clifton, Artur Shilovs, Connor Dewar, Tommy Novak, and those 3 guys were all acquired.
Novak's basically new. Yeah, he barely played last year.
No, and I'd written him down in one spot, but I talked about him with that second line as well. Yeah, he was acquired at the end of last year. And then, of course, the guy that everybody is most excited about is Ben Kendall, who not only has proven to be very much worth a number 11 pick in the first round of this NHL draft, but maybe even a lot higher than that. He has become capable of playing top 6 minutes as a forward at 18 years old. And I think he's done a really good job of creating chances for the kid line, that third line for Pittsburgh right now that hasn't necessarily cashed in on them. So I guess to sum it up, Jason, would you say that this team is at a better place going into 2026 than it was going into 2025?
Absolutely, King. Absolutely. Resounding yes. And I mean, I really liked covering Mike Sullivan. I thought he was a fantastic person, coach, all of that stuff. Cannot say enough nice things. It was time. And I think moving on from Sullivan, charting the direction that they're charting, you outlined a lot of these guys, giving Ben Kendall an opportunity to come up here and play. They kind of allowed that for Harrison Brunick. It didn't work out quite as well, but I'm no less excited about Harrison Brunick and his potential. I look at the draft, the rest of their draft, like a Will Horkoff and what they have in the pipeline, and Kyle Dubas making a concerted effort to bring in more young guys. Just trades they've made. Like, they are trying to do something that is very hard, rebuild, reload on the fly. And I actually think they're closer to getting it done than they are for it not happening. I don't think, again, to link it back to present times, just briefly, I don't think that they're not the greatest team in hockey. They're not going to be a Final Four Eastern Conference team. But can this team surprise some people and make the playoffs? Yes, I do believe that, which is far better than a lot of people expected. And I think it speaks to the path that they're on and the job that Kyle Dubas and Dan Muse have done. So absolutely. And if I can talk about the Hoffmans just briefly, boy, do I like everything that I'm hearing. I know you're hearing a lot of the same stuff, but about their enthusiasm, about their understanding of how you attach yourself or how you, relate to Penguins fans and show them that you care. I do think they care. I think they're, it's not as much of a corporate entity as FSG was. I think you're going to see more of a personal touch. I think you're going to see a handling of Mario Lemieux that is much better. They're on a very good path, man. I thought 2025 was a very good year for them.
If you feel good about the GM and Kyle Dubas, which I think both of us do for all the reasons we've talked about, the fact that he's drafted some really intriguing players, including guys that are contributing now, that he has made some really savvy free agency moves and trades, some reclamation projects that have come to Pittsburgh and truly been reclaimed, have turned into something positive. And then you feel good about the coach, which I think both of us do, and Dan Muse for, again, all the reasons we talked about. And you have a blossoming crop of young talent. Obviously, there's going to be growing pains. Couple that with a lot of talented older players who are still capable of producing. Those three levels of the team all feel pretty good going into 2026, even knowing you're far from a cup contender. The one question is what you just mentioned, the ownership, and I think we're hearing good things in that regard as well. So we're going to take a quick break, and then, like the Penguins and like the world, we're going to turn the page on 2025 and look at 2026 for this team. And I think in doing that, we need to talk about their newest addition, who they traded for, Columbus forward Yegor Chinakhov. Probably should have mentioned him earlier in the show, but better late than never. First, a super duper quick break. Back here on the Post-Gazette Penguins podcast. It's New Year's Eve, folks. I'm King Jemison, joined by Jason Mackey. And Jason, we just talked about a very eventful 2025. We said this team is entering 2026 better than they started 2025, and that's obviously a positive direction. But they made a little roster shakeup right at the end of the year. And I'm not talking about the Tristan Jarry trade in mid-December that obviously gets way more headlines, bringing in Stuart Skinner and Brett Kulak and sending out your longtime number one goalie. But they also, earlier this week, acquired Columbus forward Yegor Chinakhov, a 24-year-old Russian, former first-round pick in 2020, has at times showcased dazzling potential, has a great shot, but also fell out of favor with Columbus, had locker room issues to the extent that he requested a trade, had disagreements about the health situation that he was dealing with his back. So it didn't work out for him in Columbus. Now Kyle Dubas pays a 2026 second-round pick, a 2027 third-round pick, and Danton Heinen to bring him to Pittsburgh. At first blush, what did you think about that trade?
That it made all the sense in the world, King. I've been waiting. I actually wish Kyle Dubas would have done something like this sooner. I think it makes a ton of sense. Like, they are stockpiling these draft picks, which is great. I'm all in favor of it, but you can't have that many players matriculate onto your NHL roster. Like, the draft picks are also capital. They're money. They're traveler's checks for us older people. Good move. I don't know if it's going to work out, but he's a high pedigreed, skilled forward that they theoretically can have for a while at a reasonable price. And you give them some opportunity, which the Penguins are in a position to do, and you might have something. I mean, that's how you do this. A lot of people, I'm one of them, wanting to see the Penguins maybe be a little bit more aggressive in free agency or something of the like, bring in some pieces for multiple years or make those trades. We're not walking into a store here. Like, it's a tough needle to thread. And this is the kind of player that you need to find a situation where it didn't necessarily work out with the Blue Jackets, but this guy has some skill. He was taken in the first round for a reason. I don't necessarily care about the injury situation. It seems like that is in the past, and it might fail horribly, but you have a lot of those draft picks to make moves like this, to take these chances. They're calculated risks. I'm okay with that. If it works out, it's really, really good. King, I don't know. I haven't seen enough of this kid to say, oh, he's going to be an absolute fit or he's going to be terrible. I'm not smart enough to make that call, but I know that other people thought highly enough of his game, and that the Penguins need players with pedigree, and they're not necessarily in a position to get them immediately. Good trade. I liked it.
Yeah, they still have the most picks in the first three rounds of any NHL franchise over the next four drafts. They still have a lot of these second and third round picks to play with. And yes, they now have two fewer chances to acquire a quality player. But I think you put it really well. You can't draft all of these guys. You simply don't have room in your system. You don't have the ability to develop all of them. If you talk to people in the Penguins front office, they take developing guys who are not in Pittsburgh very seriously. It is a heavy workload to really take the time that you need to work on guys and specific things. You can't do that if you have a gazillion young players spread out over the world. So I think it's a good trade as well. Chinakhov walked into the UPMC Lemieux Sports Complex in Cranberry for Tuesday morning skate right as it was ending. And we asked
How did you guys see him walk in, by the way?
I saw him. He had his suitcase. There was a Columbus bag, a tote bag, his like roller suitcase. He had his sticks in hand, and he
just like walked through the front door.
Yeah, no, I mean, I didn't see him physically walking in the building, but I saw him strolling through to the locker room with all his stuff. And Dan Muse appropriately said they were going to let him get acclimated. He's going to be a restricted free agent in the end of this season. I don't think you make this trade if you're not planning on keeping him beyond this year. But you talked about being aggressive with cap space. This team is projected to have about $54 million of cap space going into next year. And of course, if that happens, that means you've got a lot of players going out the door. We know Evgeny Malkin is an unrestricted free agent. So is Kevin Hayes, Anthony Mantha, Noel Achari, Blake Lizotte, Connor Dewar, Connor Clifton, Brett Kulak, Ryan Shea, and Stuart Skinner. So a huge number of your contributors are not guaranteed to be on the team next year, but you have the ability to maybe get aggressive in the summer if you want to, particularly if you see some positive signs this year. So, Jason,
I better want to, King. They better want to. 87 is going to want him to go. 87 wants him to go now, and he deserves that. I have a bunch of thoughts inside of that, but yeah, I don't want to cut you off.
Yeah, so I was going to say, let's transition to really talking more high level. We'll have a chance to analyze Chinakhov's game when he enters the lineup. I would imagine that's going to be Thursday, just based on what Dan Muse said, but we won't find that out until tomorrow. But before we transition fully to 2026, I want to remind you again that this show is presented by FanDuel, and you can bet on all the NHL action there. And there are still some games in 2025, including Thursday night's opponent for the Penguins, the Detroit Red Wings, who are a -115 favorite over Winnipeg tonight. That would be Wednesday night. And somehow, Jason, that means for 3 straight games, the Penguins are playing a team on the second night of a back-to-back when they themselves did not have a game the night before. So thank you, NHL schedule makers.
The schedule's a lot better in January, by the way. I've been kind of reflecting on like December wrapping up, which has been horrendous. It's been a very difficult run logistically and against the teams they're playing. It's a lot easier in January. Chance to make some hay for this team.
Yeah, for sure. And one very long road trip to Western Canada, otherwise a fair amount of time at home and just short road trips in between. But Jason, turning our attention to 2026, there's going to be a lot of big things happening for the Penguins. Among those, multiple of their players are going to be competing in the Olympics. Of course, Sidney Crosby for Team Canada, a many-time Olympic hero, and Erik Karlsson and Rickard Rakell likely on Team Sweden as well. First of all, what are you expecting to see from those guys on that stage? And what does it mean for the Penguins that 3 of their veterans are going to be playing very, very competitive hockey during the Olympic break?
Well, it means it'll be entertaining for us, right? I think it means that they have good players. That I don't know how many non-playoff teams you see with 3 guys on Olympic rosters, and there should be a 4th. Let me work that in there. Brian Rust should be on Team USA. I hope so. He deserves it. He'd be a great ad. But, you have 4 players at least that are Olympic caliber. And frankly, it should be 5 if Russia was competing. I think Evgeny Malkin would still be on that roster. That's a separate discussion. But, I mean, I think it means that they have a chance. I'm intrigued by Rickard Rakell tonight, by the way. It might be not in this tournament because of what we saw last night. I think he's been trending in a really good direction. What I've seen out of Rickard Rakell, this is the type of playmaking and shot taking that generally manifests pretty well. I think he's in a good spot and probably about to break out. But I think it's going to be an intriguing tournament. I think it's going to be a needed break for the Penguins, a needed break for every NHL team. This compressed NHL schedule, it's been a topic of conversation everywhere I've gone this season on how weird the schedule is and how, the effect that it has had on teams, and the Penguins adding to that, having the trip over to Sweden. But anyway, I think it's going to make for a very interesting tournament. Sidney Crosby on the international stage again. I remember being in Dallas talking to him about that, and his eyes light up whenever Sid talks about being able to compete in the Olympics and he should be allowed. It's just, man, I'm looking forward to it. I don't want to look past anything. We got World Juniors right now and a very fascinating NHL season, but it's going to be a lot of fun in February.
Yeah, I mean, just going to be such a stage for hockey, building off of Four Nations last year. I think you're probably going to see, if things play out the way fans hope they will, you're probably going to see a groundswell of support for that last part of the NHL season and into the playoffs. Casual sports fans engaged in a way that they aren't usually. On that note about Brian Rust, team historian Bob Grove tweeted out last night that since Thanksgiving Eve, he's actually been the Penguins' leading scorer with 19 points in 17 games. Oftentimes very quiet, but he would seem to be a great fit. He's very comfortable playing alongside elite players and doing the dirty work that's required to elevate those guys. That's a separate conversation. Jason, if you look at the Penguins playoff odds, they're still plus 340 at FanDuel, which means FanDuel is very confident they're not going to be in the playoffs. If you look at analytical models, generally they're around a 30% chance of making the playoffs. What do you think about this team's chances of making it to the first round?
I'd like the analytical models or somebody who doesn't think the Penguins can make it to walk into a room and tell Sidney Crosby he can't do something again. When he has a group that is close, when there's a belief in there, when there's a defiance in there, which there is, again, pending injuries. If 19 players get hurt, they're going to have a tough time. Even 4 players get hurt. But no, man, I think they've proven they're able to get there. Can they do it consistently enough? Big question. Can they get the goaltending? Big question. What happens post-trade deadline when I would expect Kyle Dubas to be busy? Big question. But I'm not writing them off that now. I don't know how you can. I don't know how you look at a team. Again, I was using the Olympic model, but look at their special teams. When they're going well, you have 2 top 10 special teams. When Evgeny Malkin's back, you should have 2 quality scoring lines and a 4th line that adds value. Again, this is assuming people stay healthy. You have 2 pretty good defensemen, as frustrated as they make people in Karlsson and Letang. If you can get the goaltending, again, not talking about them being Final Four in the Eastern Conference. We're talking about getting to the playoffs. And I think we've seen the blueprint that they can get there. It's just a matter of doing it consistently. So I guess that's my reaction to it. Is I do believe in this team's ability to do that, for it being proven enough, for it having enough weapons there, that I'm not going to write them off at this point. I can't.
Yeah. It would be unwise to, given that they're 2 points out of a playoff spot right now. And then in terms of regulation wins, they're up there with teams that are well above them in the standings. We just know that they've let a lot of points slip away in overtime, and hopefully that has started to dissipate a bit. But they are currently 2 points behind the Florida Panthers and the Washington Capitals for a wild card spot. They're 4 points behind the Philadelphia Flyers for the last spot in the Metro for that number 3 spot. So much hockey to be played. And the crazy thing about this Eastern Conference is you lose one game or you win one game, you can slide up and down several spots in the standings. Standings watch is probably not a wise game to be playing until much later in the season. It's just about racking up as many points as they can and hopefully staying healthy so that they can make a push towards the end of the season. The other question with that, Jason, is, and I would say that I would bet against this team making the playoffs, just given how much they're going to have to overcome and the teams that are ahead of them and even behind them. But it's certainly a possibility.
Yeah.
Regardless of whether they remain in the hunt, what do you think about this team's chances of making a big trade? They've obviously made likely the biggest one they're going to do this season with sending away Tristan Jarry. But do you think Rickard, Rakell, Brian Rust, Erik Karlsson, or somebody of that ilk could be available at the deadline?
Now, could they be available? Yes. Are they going to trade them? No, I don't think so. I think Kyle Dubas will take calls on them, as he should, but I think he's at a point, I guess maybe Rakell over any of them would maybe make them. I don't know. I go back and forth on Karlsson because, I mean, on one hand, you would be wise to get out from under the contract while you still can. He's also your power play quarterback, and I don't know how much faith you want to put in Chris Letang being your top offensive defenseman at this point. It comes back to this for me, King. If they're in a place of contention, not clearly out of it, I think that's going to be a really tough sell to the players in that dressing room to, based on what the preseason expectations are, what the rhetoric has been from Kyle Dubas saying, like, I expect us to be better. I expect us to improve and all this stuff. Like, if you're saying you expect the team to improve and they improve, and then you pull the rug out from under them, what are you doing? That's kind of inconsistent. And I understand, like, Kyle's side of it, where he has to think long-term and he has to think about managing a roster and he's got a job to do. And I understand all of that. But, like, right now, the players in that dressing room have done a job. If this continues and they're playing well, I'm saying if they're in a playoff spot or like within 1 or 2 points at the deadline, obviously if they're far out of it, that's a different discussion. But if that happens, they've done their job over and above expectations. You have to honor that. You have to honor that. And to me, that is not making a quote unquote big trade. Like, can you trade a guy on an expiring contract like Stuart Skinner or Brett Kulak? Yes, absolutely. Can you trade Anthony Mantha? Yes, absolutely. Like, those are business decisions that players understand. But trading Rakell, Rust, Karlsson, I mean, unless somebody's coming in and offering you 4 first-round picks, I think that's going to be a hard one to navigate for Dubas. I just do. What about you?
Yeah, let's talk specifically about those 3 players, Rakell, Rust, and Karlsson, who I think would be the 3 biggest names that could conceivably be traded, assuming they don't do something to the big 3. Rakell and Rust are signed for 2 more years after this one, each making $5 million or just a little more than that. They're both in their early 30s. I think it is an extremely likely bet that they will continue to more than produce at the level of that contract for these next 2 years. And they're both seemingly excellent guys to have around the locker room that you would like your young players to be exposed to. And they're going to help you win in the meantime. So I would say, business-wise, unless you are getting a very, very highly touted prospect or a high first-round level pick at least, I don't think those guys are on the table or shouldn't be. And Karlsson, yes, you talked about the contract. He's making $10 million next year, and then he's going to be an unrestricted free agent. I don't think you're going to get the value that his play has actually dictated, because people have seen him in his recent years where he has looked like a liability at times. And obviously there's been bad moments this year as well. But I think he is more valuable to the Penguins than a trade you're going to get for him in return would indicate. And I think that is as good a reason to keep somebody as possible. I think Anthony Mantha, if he continues to play like this, is just going to give Kyle Dubas an ace in the hole, almost like found money that this guy you signed in the offseason as kind of an afterthought plays his way into producing maybe not only on the ice, but something in return as well. And if Malkin gets healthy and you stay relatively healthy in your forward rotation, otherwise you can't afford to lose him as well as he's played. And I think the best thing that can happen for the Penguins is Stuart Skinner playing really well, as he did last night against Carolina, bumping up that trade value and having some team desperate for a goaltender take a swing at him and open up the door for Sergei Murashov, which I think is a pretty likely scenario over the rest of this season.
I don't disagree with you, King, but here's what it comes down to for me. Do you want to do that if your team's competitive?
Yeah.
I probably do. I mean, I'm not disagreeing with you. I just think it's an interesting dynamic where, like, you're hoping Stuart Skinner plays well enough to bump up his trade value, of course. But if he's playing well enough to bump up his trade value, they're probably in a playoff spot. If Erik Karlsson's playing well, if Rickard Rakell's playing well, if things are going well, they're probably in a playoff spot. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? You're going to tell these guys that we have to now trade everybody. I think some of it's understood. A lot of it won't be. I just, and the X factor here for me, and I'll shut up after this because I know we've already gone long, but like the Hoffman family of companies, you're taking over a team, right? Like maybe the sale is closed by that point. I don't know. Even if it's not, you're pretty far down the road. Like, does this team want to sell off assets and walk into a situation where, our name's on this company, we want it to be good. We also want the playoff revenue. Let's not discount that. Like, that's real money. Get to the playoffs, Kyle. Don't trade Anthony Mantha. We would rather pay his, salary, because if we think that helps us get to the playoffs, then that's going to help a lot more with our brand and putting butts in seats and concessions and all that stuff. I mean, that's a perfectly valid argument for ownership. Like, I don't have the answers to the question. I think it's just you can see it coming down the pike. You can see the possibility, and I think it's going to be fascinating.
The muddled Eastern Conference standings and the questions about ownership and the fact that you do have Crosby continuing to play excellent hockey and you want to give him a chance, I think it's going to lead to a quieter trade deadline.
Yeah.
I think there's a very real possibility that this team makes almost no major moves. But you also could see Dubas kind of swinging the other way, not selling off players, but trying to acquire guys, take swings like he did on Chinakhov. So we got plenty of time to talk about that. I'm sure that will be a huge point of conversation during the Olympic break as we can kind of zoom out, look at the standings, look at potential deals. But I think that's going to do it for a very long Post-Gazette Penguins podcast here on New Year's Eve. Jason, do you have any lingering thoughts from a very busy 2025 for you and this team?
No, I'm good. We got them out. If you stuck with us through all 35 minutes, thank you. We'll try to be tighter next time.
Yeah, we will. Yeah, this is on me. I packed a lot into this outline for today. Got excited about the new year and all the possibilities of zooming out and talking about big picture stuff. But thank you all so much for listening to the Post-Gazette Penguins podcast. Please like and subscribe wherever you're seeing or listening to this. And also please subscribe at post-gazette.com. That's the best of everything. And we're got plenty of content about this team's nice run out of the holiday break. We'll be back on this feed later this week, and the Penguins will be back on the ice tomorrow, New Year's Day, against the Detroit Red Wings at 7 p.m. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and have a great day.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.